the Smith of Scotland.
You'll be hearing me clap a lot. That's because I do it to help line up the audio between these cameras and then this one too. I'm coming in really loud. But yeah, a lot of my buddies, they always find that funny. Like, I can't tell you how many of them I'll do the clap and then we have to wait like a couple minutes for them to stop laughing.
It lets you sync the audio. I mean, it's very quick if you have the clap. If you don't, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
There's a reason.
I found out a couple months ago that it's actually called the slate, the thing that the
like the
on set, the action. Yeah, people that listen to the show are like, again with this story. But anytime I have new people in the studio, I like to run it by them.
It's clutch for video post.
Oh, yeah. It makes it so much easier.
My very first job out of college was as a gopher, essentially, at Sony Music Studios on 54th and 10th. And half the studio's video post and half was like audio recording and audio post. And so it was just constantly, at least for the first 6 months, bringing snacks in the middle of the night to people working on like the first version of Chappelle's Show or the Destiny's Child video or wherever it was. And like every once in a while I'd get to do something cool, but not enough.
Is that why you're not working there anymore?
There are many, many fine reasons of not working there, including having been laid off the same day as 1,000 other people when Sony corporate was like, no. And they just fired 1,000 people in one day.
Are you originally from New York?
I'm from Connecticut originally.
Okay.
But I've been here for basically ever.
Okay, interesting. How about you?
I'm from Massachusetts, so moved here about 7 years ago.
How do you like it?
I love it. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a transition at first, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was visiting him before, and he always was saying that Boston was a bullshit city. So,
Hey, as New Yorkers, I think a lot of people would agree to that.
Our children are now Red Sox fans, though, because there's a kid in their class that likes the Red Sox, so they've adapted that.
Okay, look, I'm a Met fan, so they don't pay me as much, but I'm sure some Yankee fans are probably driving up the wall.
Yeah.
I've had you on the show before, and I learned a lot from that episode. I've had a lot of people reach out to me to this day about it too, and it's one that I learned a lot about the mistakes that I made on that show. Kind of treated it like a therapy session for me the first time I spoke to you. And it was funny because after we were messaging back and forth, and you're like, it's kind of my job.
You
so
kind of do that, yeah. It kind of happens.
But I appreciate you coming back on, and Owen, you as well, coming back on. I love the work that you guys do. We connected on Clubhouse a while back, and it's a topic that I'm super passionate about. I talk about it often, post about it often. Mental health, suicide prevention, the whole nine. We connected because my buddy Sergio had passed away around the holidays last year. And it was like the first time that I experienced something like that. And then going on Clubhouse, hearing you talk, I was like, oh, shit, they're from Brooklyn, close by. And it was great to connect. So I'm glad that you're back, have you guys in studio, which I'm really, really excited about.
Glad to be here. Brought my husband here.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
Anytime I get to both talk about mental health and have great audio, I'm a pig in poop.
Yeah, and also you're a sports fan too, right?
I am a sports enthusiast for some sports, mostly like more extreme skiing, stuff like that. That was the only sport I was ever good at, essentially, and that's the stuff I really, aerials and stuff like that gets me going.
Interesting. We did a green room over the summer. And it was a really interesting conversation. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the audio. There was some issues with the green room. They went from locker room to green room.
People live the dream if they were listening, and then they're just going to have to guess.
Yeah.
Of how remember how great it was?
Yeah.
All the amazing things we talked about.
We'll try to recreate that for everybody.
I mean,
now.
we can hope. Maybe.
So, Carlene, some of the conversations around mental health I like to think they're polarizing in a way. Some people are afraid to talk about it. Some people talk about it. There is a fine line when it comes to athletes and mental health. What is something that you've noticed when it comes to just mental health approach in general in your field?
Yeah, I mean, I think that over the past few years, it's become much more popular in the media and like social media to talk about it. But a lot of the messaging is like pretty superficial. It's kind of like veers into the kind of toxic positivity realm versus like people who are really, really struggling. I don't find the messaging to be really kind of hitting for people that are, really like super depressed or suicidal. It's kind of like self-care, like take time for yourself, like have work-life balance. And I don't think those messages really resonate with like the folks that we work with.
It seems very broad in general, the messaging as far as what their steps are for you to get better.
Yeah, and also like finding coverage, like finding people that take your insurance that you can afford. It's really, really hard. So I think we're seeing a lot more things kind of crop up where you can like have a membership fee or something like that. And then even that is expensive for a lot of folks.
How about you, Owen? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I'm so obsessed with it that has become what I do for a living, essentially. What was so surprising for me over the course of my 10 or so years as a psychiatrist is I thought the problem was going to be, gosh, how am I ever going to get people well? And it turns out like science has gotten to the point where that's not my primary concern. I have interventions, things we can do, therapies that work, treatments that are effective, like to a degree that is shocking to me thinking about where we started, and yet getting people to either have access to any of those things at some kind of rate they can afford, or even believe that they could work, that's the hard part. And for people who aren't of means, and it can be really expensive, it can be almost impossible to get access to help in a lot of the world, and that drives me up the wall enough that I started a third-party payer, aka like version of an insurance company that isn't as effed up as insurance companies are kind of forced to be. It's a real rabbit hole.
Yeah, it seems like it. What's changed from when you first got into covering this topic to now?
So the first thing is people will talk about it.
Yeah.
But they don't really know what to talk about yet because, frankly, even talking about mental health is so new for people that they're doing it in this really tentative way. And so they'll say things like, yeah, we really like to talk about mental health, but, are you going to talk about, like, not getting out of bed because you want to die? Probably not. Someone having thoughts of suicide? No, not that. I really like the term sanity because it's not like there are a lot of things you can do for your sanity that are, like, not necessarily a great idea or healthy even per se, but do they keep you from going over the off your rocker? Sure. Right. And there are plenty of things that I think are within that domain that I feel really comfortable with people talking about. But like, I'm a psychiatrist, which is a medical subspecialty, and people don't talk about, hand health and pretend to be hand surgeons. Like, it's not something people do. It's complicated. It turns out to be very complicated, and people can suffer a lot. And part of the problem with simplifying it to just the blanket term of mental health is you lose any ability to differentiate mild, moderate, severe, incapacitating levels of problems. And I think that does a disservice to people anywhere on that spectrum, because some people need a lot of help, some people need a little help, and some people can get by without much help at all. And those can be really different things. And honestly, the insurance situation has gone from bad to worse because of fundamental underlying incentives that are bad for all of us at the end of the day.
How about you? How do you feel about that? The transition from when you first got into this to now, because you mentioned something in passing about social media, how it has put a spotlight on it. Mm-hmm. However, there is a lot of misconception in mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the treatments that we're most excited about aren't necessarily the stuff that you see in social media. So, like, we do something called transcranial magnetic stimulation for severe depression and OCD, sort of giant brain magnets. You don't really see the posts about that,
Right?
But it really works. We are seeing more posts about psychedelic medicine, though. Actually, so I think we're seeing more celebrities engaging in treatments like with psilocybin or ketamine or things like that to really help them, and that's like much easier to kind of get messaging out about because it's got kind of it's cool,
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know how much, if you've seen any of that, but like Lamar Odom, I think got ketamine treatment in LA and wrote about it.
Yeah, and it seems as if, again, the word polarizing is probably going to come up a lot, because if you're sort of endorsing drugs or something like that, you do get opposite sides of the spectrum in that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, there's oftentimes people will say, like, don't take ADHD medications because they're controlled substances, or there's misconceptions that it would make somebody more likely to abuse drugs, and really the opposite is true. Or there's something about sort of being tough and toughing it up without meds, right? And just sort of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, that there's a weakness to take the medications that I think we're fighting. And I think there's more acceptance of taking meds now, but still, you run into it.
I'll give you an example of how different it is. There's now a treatment which is approved by the FDA, and it's for depression that hasn't responded to oral medications in the past. And the chance of it getting you to remission, having your depression be over, is on the order of 50%. And the chance of it getting you in remission or at least halfway better is 70%. There are no long-term side effects that we know of. And short-term side effects include euphoria, aka feeling really good for a short period of time. That's a side effect of the medication. Approved by the FDA. No sexual side effects, no weight gain, nothing. That exists right now.
With me, when I was going through some mental health issues, one of the things that sort of turned me off to going to see someone, that was the initial response to my issues was to put me on some sort of medication. And I'm like grossed out by pills. Needles, pills, the whole nine. I've never done any drugs. I like to drink. I was being a gentleman before. I should have offered you some whiskey or something. We could drink on the show.
Never had a drink.
He doesn't drink. I drink.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's great. That's great. I can't say the same though.
Neither,
big beer guy.
Neither could my dad.
So, for me, like pills, medication like that, it kind of turned me off to going to see help. Is that something that?
What I just described isn't a pill. It's a nasal spray. It's called Spravato, or S-ketamine. So they took the thing that used to be in a needle and they made it a nasal spray. That's it, like Afrin. Not a pill. And have you ever even heard of that?
No, this is the first time. And my dad is like addicted to Afrin. He thinks he has like these.
I think my dad is too.
Oh my God! I buy him 2 to 3 bottles a week. I'm like, dude, how do you just run through these things? Like, what's going on?
It's a great example of a drug that can be really addictive. And what I'm talking about there's never been a person treated for a mood disorder who's had an addiction to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that, I think to his point, there's a lot of is sort of quick fix, right? Or maybe devaluing therapy in favor of drugs. There's like either or, and I think we don't really see it that way, right? We feel like what works for a certain person, and sometimes that involves meds, sometimes it doesn't. And I think the most important thing when you're meeting someone is that they're kind of open and flexible to both paths.
If you had a stroke, nobody complains about a quick fix. Like, we want a quick fix if someone's going to die because they have a stroke. But for some reason, our response to feeling suicidal is to not want that. And that's very strange to me as a physician and as a person who's suffered crippling depression, which, would have been nice to have go away quickly.
Yeah, what about the people that come to you, and then how do you address that situation about being urgent with them or giving it time, like that approach? Because one thing with me, So I do jiu-jitsu, right? And one thing I've noticed, people that come to our gym, or if you go and venture to different gyms, you have different experiences. So that first time, if I was to bring you to take a class of jiu-jitsu, Owen, and you come with me, you'll have a different experience than if you were to walk into a random gym. Because I went one time after a year of training to this gym where one of my buddies trained at, and I got my ass whooped by these guys. And they were going super hard, very aggressive, and I was like, damn. If someone else was to come here for the first time, you're trying to embrace this new martial art, and they treat you like that, it could be a bad experience, right? So how about with you with this stuff? Could it be off-putting if immediately you're gravitating to that with the medication?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the individual. So some people come like already kind of seeking that out, and that's very different versus people that really want to be understood and you need to actually spend time with them. I think that with a lot of the kind of healthcare in the United States, particularly insurance-based, appointments get really, really short. And so you don't have time with the person to listen. I think we tend to spend more time than a lot of practices to really kind of figure out the lay of the land and what's important to them, what do they know about meds if we think that's appropriate, or sometimes they come in wanting meds and that's actually not appropriate, right? They're trying to medicate something that really isn't going to be helped by a medication, and we think therapy is going to be more helpful. So we really kind of have to have an open mind ourselves when we're meeting the person, that we're not like, oh, you know what, this person's going to be on Prozac or this person's going to be on Adderall or whatever. We have to meet them where they're at.
It's a little bit like if you imagine like United Healthcare ran dating. So in your first date, you have 45 minutes to grill the person and ask every question you could possibly ask. And thereafter, you get 15 minutes per date once every 6 weeks. And if you'd like to go on more, you have to call and get a prior authorization to have any more time spent. It's like go to jiu-jitsu.
It's artificial.
The first time you get you're just beaten to death, whether you want to or not, and then you get to decide whether you want to go back. Like, none of those things make sense in any other context, and yet we think 45 minutes full of deeply invasive questions to throw a prescription at you is the right way to do a thing, which sounds, in any other context, bonkers, and I think in this context it is similarly bonkers.
Yeah, especially with how difficult that conversation about being depressed and suicidal thoughts is. Me walking into your clinic to meet with you two and immediately just pouring my heart out, it could be a little threatening to someone. Mm-hmm. So, like you were saying, going in there, just out in the cold and kind of just putting it all out there in such a short period of time, it could be overwhelming.
The first time you meet someone, you should probably get to know them.
Right.
And, like, there's literally no, like, payment code to, like, spend time getting to know somebody. Like, you literally have to put down a diagnosis to get paid. And the first time you meet anybody in any other context, you're not like, well, we have to get to the root of the problem right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird,
Yeah,
right?
The pacing can be really off,
very
right?
strange. Yeah.
So I think being able to spend more time with folks and really kind of listen is where you actually do the best work.
Yeah.
If someone comes to you and they say that they, depending on what stage they are in their depression or suicidal thoughts, is your response to them different?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, you've seen one person with depression, you've seen one person with depression, right? Everyone is going to be very different in sort of how they get to that point and kind of what they need. So, absolutely varies widely.
It's like saying to a basketball team, only 3-pointers. Mm. That's it. Sorry, nothing else. Well, why? Because that's the only thing that's going to count. Like, sometimes you got to dunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you got to kind of know all the tools that are out there, right? You don't want to get kind of stuck in sort of one pattern, right? That sort of every hammer sees a nail kind of thing.
Carlene, when someone comes to you and they tell you that they're feeling depressed or suicidal, what are some of the factors that go into that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, people come with family history, right? So like they may have other family members that have gone through something similar, but then there's also all the life circumstances, COVID, job stuff, all kinds of like personal factors. And then there's like biological factors, like what time of year is it, right? For some people, like clockwork, every October they're going to get depressed. So we're looking at all these kind of variables that can kind of lead to that. And I'm always usually interested in like, when did they not feel that way? When did they feel maybe not good, but maybe less depressed than they are now? And looking at those kind of inflection points, because that's usually where you get a lot of data as to kind of where things kind of went in the more depressed direction.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because when I got really depressed and at my lowest I kind of just had a lot of life happen at once. Mm-hmm. I'm 30 now. I was 25, 26 years old. I was going to be a police officer for Nassau County. So I was waiting on that. I was doing the podcast. I was working in the city with my father, barely sleeping 4 hours a day tops. I had put on a lot of weight when I was younger too, so trying to lose that, getting very active. And then when I was going through the investigating process to be a police officer, they sort of gave me an ultimatum as far as you can't be on the internet doing your podcast and stuff and being a police officer too. So make a decision before we continue this process. I get disqualified. I did a 70 and a 50 on the way back home from work. That cost me like close to $20,000.
Oh my God.
Retainer fees, trying to get it overturned, being pulled by so many different directions. My parents are telling me job security, benefits, vacations. You know, it's more, again, job security, and it's a prideful job and all that. And I was like, guys, I'm going crazy. I don't want to do this, you know. Right. And I couldn't commit to the show, which was the one thing I really loved doing, because I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Right, I got into some arguments with some really close buddies who now I don't really talk to like I used to. And a lot of it was just all these factors happening at one time, Owen. Because when I said the life thing, you kind of like rolled your eyes like, yeah, dude, that's kind of what happens.
I've personally and heard that story over and over again. I mean, the police force, for example, is a kind of priesthood, right? You are in or you're out, and you're in the culture of being a police officer and with your brothers and sisters, or you're not. And same is true for firemen, same is true for doctors. And that requires a real shift. And if you have other things in your life, they can't be more important than the role that you have to have on, in many cases for the safety of you and your colleagues. Same thing in the military, same thing in a lot of, in a literal priesthood, right? When you're in a culture like that, there's a lot of asked of you, and it's asked for good reasons in some cases. Like, if you F up as a cop, you're going to die. If you, or your partner will die, worse yet, and his family or her family will be, all the things, right? and so I imagine when they were looking at you doing this other thing, why aren't you all in? Can we trust you? And that issue of mistrust is a really important one that I basically assume people have for mental health professionals. Essentially, like, I do not trust you is what I assume people think when they're coming in to talk to me.
Why?
Because they have very good reasons not to. So it's a little bit like talking to a detective, right? They know all sorts of stuff that you don't. They've done this thousands of times for tens of thousands of hours. What are they really thinking? What are they really thinking of me? Are they judging me right now?
But I feel like the judgment coming from you is more helpful than it is someone else.
Maybe. But the expectations might not be that. If your first experience with mental health help is you're suicidal and someone calls 911, you're an EDP, you're a cop, you probably took you to the Long Island Jewish Medical Center where I trained when you're, right? And, for the police, you show up at the door with EMS, and if the person resists, they got to be put in cuffs, right? And they're strapped down to a gurney in the ambulance because you can't lock the back door by law. Now, people don't know that, but people could jump out of the ambulance. You can't have that happen. And when they're brought to the ER, they can't stay in the clothing they came with because that's not safe. But you don't necessarily know that when you're coming in for the first time. It's when someone says strip. And by the way, your family can't be with you back here, and it's going to be hours. And don't get out of that chair, or we're going to stick you with injectable Haldol. That's not an experience that says, you can relax now. And if that's the first time, let's say you broke your toe, and that was the process to get your toe fixed, everyone would be limping.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't want to go, that's for sure.
It's not irrational. No. It is like when people...
It doesn't feel like help, right?
It doesn't feel like help.
A punishment.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring
right? And I mean, we see a lot of young people too, maybe their parents want them to be there, or maybe boyfriend, girlfriend, someone else is sort of kind of forcing them to come, and so they're already kind of off to a kind of negative start,
so it's against their will, sort of.
Yeah, or it's if you don't go to therapy, then I'll leave you, or we won't give we won't pay for your apartment, or whatever the sort of carrot and stick is for them to be there. They're not really like, they're not really wanting to be there. They don't really trust, who am I? And so there's a lot that has to be done to kind of build that rapport and build that trust.
And one of the symptoms of having a broken toe isn't not knowing your toe's broken. But that's literally a symptom of severe depression or mania with bipolar disorder, or like the definition of psychosis is that you don't understand often.
Insight can be
impaired.
Yeah.
Like, am I depressed? The answer being no actually is a symptom of being more depressed. And so when you're in that situation and all those things are happening, you might not even understand why. And so my kind of take on it is, having like honestly been in that position, I have been psychiatrically hospitalized when I was younger because, voluntarily, but I was really depressed and I had to walk in and go through that whole rigmarole after I was just doing that the day before as the doctor. And then they're locking me on the unit. And I knew what to expect and it still sucked. And for people who have no idea what to expect, what are you supposed to think? And I think it's a deeply weird thing, and in many cases awful and traumatizing. And that's the first experience someone might have in a crisis with whatever help is. It's got really bad branding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and you could definitely sense someone feeling like their back is against the wall, and then having an experience like that can send you over the top.
Mm-hmm. And so that's why when I talk to somebody, one of the things I ask them is, has help ever been helpful?
Interesting.
And so that I know at least where are we starting?
Yeah.
How far behind the 8 ball am I with you just by being a doctor here to theoretically help you? And the nice thing about the question is it lets people know, oh, maybe I can tell a little bit of truth here. Mm-hmm. And that experience of being understood is what actually helps people.
And I think that being understood thing is big too, because I will often ask who understands you best, who is kind of gets you, and that sometimes is not the parent, it's not the best friend, it's the coach, it's the person that they see at church, it's some other person in their life that is really kind of rooting for them and wants them to succeed, and we kind of want to capitalize on that. And
now, why wouldn't it be a parent or a loved one? Is it because they're too close?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes because there's parents have expectations, right? The parents wanting somebody to be a police officer, wanting to go to the college where they played football, whatever it is, there's all kinds of their stuff gets kind of projected onto that person, versus somebody that's outside of that system, that's a third party, can see that individual differently. And I think that's what a good therapist can do. But for many folks, it's not a therapist, it's not a mental health professional, it's someone else in their life that has made that difference and taken an interest in them.
It's interesting what you bring up, because I had a very similar experience with my parents. And look, I don't want to paint the picture with my parents. Great relationship. I hope one day I have little Nicks running around, and my relationship with them is what I have with my parents. The only thing we butt heads on, Owen, my dad's a big smoker. Mm-hmm. So that's the only thing. It's dude, your health, I want you around. Let's get, you're overweight too. Come on, man. I'm not asking you to run marathons with me or roll on the ground, but let's take care of yourself a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to preface that before I start this conversation. But when I was growing up and I went away to school, played football, I could see how my parents were talking to other parents about oh, he's away in college, he's playing football, he's going to go be a cop, right?
Yep.
So when I was going through that process and I just said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. My dad was like, you're going to have to figure it out. I was like, I'll figure it out. The podcast, I'll figure it out. And then those conversations were not the same. Oh, what's Nick doing? He's doing all right.
Yeah, deviated from the playbook.
Right. There wasn't the excitement of, he's up on a pedestal, right? Because this was also a new form of media, the podcast. Old school mentality, immigrant came over from Greece, from the ground up kind of thing. And there was a line in a song I always reference from Kid Cudi. He says, I hope they understand that I really understand that they don't understand. And that really resonated with me, because my dad to this day, now he's more working with the win in Vegas, now being paid to do this stuff too. And my dad was very points to the pockets. When I asked him, Dad, what's it mean to be successful? That was his mentality, right?
Right.
So Now he's more prideful of what I'm doing, also because it worked out. Is that something that you were talking about with maybe the parents or the boyfriend, girlfriend, the best friend isn't the person you should turn to?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, we talked about what to do in a crisis, and you'll see like crisis plans where people write stuff down and they'll write like, who should you call? I actually focus more on like, who shouldn't you call? Because people will oftentimes repeatedly call the same person over and over who's not helpful. I think it's a saying from AA, right? Like, don't go to the hardware store and ask for a glass of milk. So like, if you always are going to your mother and she's like pretty much never supportive, probably need to find someone else, because you're just going to be like repeatedly disappointed when you're, in trouble.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like I have friends that I tell everything to, and then I have other friends where when it's good news, I don't share it with them. Mm-hmm. When it's bad news, I won't share it with. There's certain people that you go to that you know, and I think I had told you this the last time we recorded. I have a friend where he's like, dude, I love you. You were in my wedding party. Don't come to me with your problems. I got my own shit I got to worry about. And I can respect that because at least he set the boundaries. This is the line. Please don't cross it. Mm-hmm. I like what you said about the numbers or the people you shouldn't get in contact with.
Right. That's what we see over and over is people kind of go into the, barking up the wrong tree for help.
I mean, one of the superpowers I have is I get to essentially show up and go, wait a minute, what is going on? I have no idea what's happening here. And in a crisis, that confusion that I am able to bring is one of the most important elements that I have to offer, because I literally don't understand. And so you're going to have to slow down for me, and maybe I'll figure it out. But it's literally what's happening. And not knowing is awesome. And your family can't pull that off, because they were there for all of the things essentially that led up to it. And so they literally can't do that in the same way, with the same sincerity that I can as someone who just showed up. What the hell is happening? Help me! I am lost. And that not knowingness is what I try to teach families when they're talking to each other. But it's some of that feels a little put on in the beginning, because they literally do know each other. Like, I was there when my son was born. I know what happened because I was there. And it's really like we have 5-year-old twins. And I think it's impossible for kids to understand until a lot later the amount of terror their parents have experienced in raising them, which is high, I think, across the board. The first time you have your child in your arms that is yours and you walk downstairs, you have the thought, oh my God, what if I miss a step and drop them? And that never goes away.
My mom told me a story that my dad didn't carry me until I was about 4 or 5 years old. He would have to lay down on the couch. My mom would put me on top of him.
Because he was scared he was going to drop you. Yeah, that doesn't go away.
And we're thinking the same things as parents when our kids are 26 or 40. And that's not immediately obvious to our kids. They're like, I'm a grown-up. Yeah, no, but I could have dropped you anywhere along the way, and that could still happen to me today. So it's that, there is a lot of knowledge, but there's not a lot of understanding built into that experience, because as a kid, you don't understand what's going on in your parents' mind because it was your life. You just lived through it. And we had a great example of this with a drawing our son at least theoretically drew, which it turns out I didn't, but her mom saw a picture. There was a picture that looked like two people, one on the stairs, which looked like a child with a sad face, and the other was an adult, it looked like, with a big frown on. And her mom was like,
"Has Owen to therapy?"
Oh my God, Trent's so sad. He's drawn this awful picture. Has Owen been screaming? What's wrong in your marriage?
She sent it to
my
Owen's mother as well. It was this whole chaos. And then I was like, I'm just going to ask my son, like, what's up with this picture? Because he usually draws happy pictures. And I sort of nonchalantly asked him about some pictures. And he said, oh, no, I didn't draw that. My friend drew that. It has nothing to do with anything, right? It was a complete misunderstanding. And so these types of misunderstandings happen in families when we kind of project all of our
Quinn, his sister, had fallen off a trampoline at school, and Trent was sad when that happened, and
that was the illustration. But his friend drew it. It
yeah.
wasn't even him.
It was Drac.
Yeah.
Man, you aren't
doing a documentary.
You aren't kidding about not realizing until you're a lot older what a nightmare you could be to like your parents growing up. Like me, I was the one bad thing, and when my mom hears this, she'll be shaking her head. Yeah, you're a piece of shit for doing this. But it was like, I'll go somewhere and I wouldn't let her know.
Oh yeah, that's the worst.
And there was one time where I went to, a buddy of mine has a summer house in Connecticut in Squan's Pond, New Fairfield. So lake house, jet skis and all that. And I went away for the weekend and I just didn't. She's a big, let me know when you get there. Have fun. Let me know where you're leaving. She doesn't send many messages and whatnot, but I was like 24 years old. My mom's like, hey, can we not do that? I get it. You're a big man now and you're an adult, but.
Yeah, it wants to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty normal.
When I teach children in therapy how to manipulate their parents, I'm basically selling how to be a good kid. Because practically speaking, if you let your mom know every time, you're buying yourself so much rope that you can use to hang yourself with later, relatively speaking. You can get away with anything. If on average you tell your parents what you're doing, the one time you like pull some bullshit, you're like, yeah, no, I'm going out with my friends. I'm going to be out super late. Sorry, Mom. But,
Building trust.
Building trust. It lets you get away with unbelievable murder later as a child. And and so I explain that to children in front of their parents as an aside. I'm like, so by the way, here's what you're going to do. You're going to clean up don't tell your parents you're going to do it. Don't listen, Mom and Dad. Don't tell your parents you're going to do it at all. And just let them be freaked out when they see them. Just play it off like it's nothing. See what happens. Trust me. They're going to lose it. They'll have no idea what to do. Don't even bring it up. Watch. Okay, so Mom and Dad, and the funny thing is, it actually works because no one's expecting that as the interaction. That like I'm coaching the kid on how to, essentially be a good kid, but in a way that's funny enough that they'll listen to me.
Carlene, what are some of the issues with like a lot of life happening at once? What are some of the common ones that you hear that might lead to someone getting depressed?
Job loss, right? Unexpected job loss, deaths, illness, that kind of thing. Like I've seen a lot with COVID, actually.
That was going to lead to a big talking point, which I knew we were going to address, the whole pandemic and the fallouts of it.
Yeah, it's also like the long COVID kind of thing we're seeing where people get COVID and then don't really fully recover, and that's kind of leading to a lot of problems, including some psychiatric problems as well. So.
What have you noticed about mental health through the pandemic and where we're at now? We're really coming up on 2 years since this really hit the fan. My birthday's in March, and I remember vividly the weekend before my birthday. I'm on the 11th, so the weekend before I was in Vegas. Come back, the NBA shuts down, which was like the official, oh shit, just hit the fan. A $9 billion company just canceled their season.
And I was sneaking a link so I could refresh my memory on the athletes we're talking about. So, for Paul George, that was a big deal. He was super isolated from his family. And so NBA shuts down, they get back online, and he's doing it in a weird bubble where there are no fans and he can't talk to anybody.
It's weird.
It's super weird.
Yeah. No, I think that everyone's lives really changed. I think now people kind of going back to quote unquote normal in a way. So I'm not seeing as much of the issues, but the level of isolation for folks was just sort of unprecedented. I will say people that were pretty psychiatrically unwell pre-pandemic didn't necessarily get worse because all of a sudden, like losing your job, staying at home, that was like very normal, and like not being able to pay rent, all those things became things that like a lot of people were going through. So people that were kind of in a rough spot beforehand didn't really see the change, but for a lot of people it was just such an abrupt change to how they would live their lives that it was really challenging.
It was like a Rumspringa for shut-ins.
What's that?
So there's the concept for the Amish of Rumspringa, where they get
to
they get to go and do whatever they want for like some period of time and like take a break from being Amish. And like a lot of them will come to New York and like go to the Apple store and like enjoy the technology. For people who were shut-ins before the pandemic, who were suffering from anxiety or severe depression, OCD, they got to stay home and have that be normal all of a sudden.
So they didn't feel isolated as far as, everyone is going
Everyone
through.
was isolated.
So everyone is like me.
Yeah, and even like OCD in particular, a lot of people have reported that with OCD, like all of a sudden it was quite normative to do a lot of the stuff around contamination and being clean and, you know, washing your groceries and all of those things. So I think everyone was sort of like, all right, now you're at my level that was doing that before. Not to minimize, I mean, there's certainly some people that got things worse, but I think for the population that we work with, it wasn't as dramatic. But then there's a whole bunch of people where their lives looked a certain way. They were traveling, you know, they were living pretty exciting lives, and then all of a sudden got really small, or, you know, lost their total livelihood because they were in entertainment, in Broadway, that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also feel for as much as people might hate their job, or we're always, oh my God, I got to go see Susie today, or my boss is, you know, being annoying. It was an escape too.
Yeah.
That commute, that leaving home, maybe.
It structures your time, right?
Right.
If there's like no structure, if everything blends together, you know, it's like night and day kind of blur. It's just like, yeah, kind of like a casino or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not a healthy.
It's funny you mentioned the blending thing, because that was the big reason why I moved out when I did, because last November, it's about a year now that I moved out of my parents and I got this apartment, and, you know, this is the studio, the setup, and then the other room is my bedroom. I was just doing everything at home. I'm working out at home, sleeping at home, eating, recording. I had no escape at all.
No.
Like at all. So for me, it was overwhelming. I didn't fall into depression, but I was losing my sense of creativity. It became stale to me. Some of my content was where when I press record, I feel alive, and this is like my escape. That became, I got to make sure I have this podcast up. And if I didn't move out, Owen, I don't know if I'd be talking to you guys now. I don't know if I would have had that in me to continue doing this show.
Because it would have just died on the vine.
Yeah, just because, you know, my bed was here, this setup was over there, and it's like, all right, there was no escape.
Routine, and for most people that means work, because you have to, right, is super organizing. Some of the like most unwell people on earth are those who are so wealthy they don't have to work, and that is just a curse I would wish on no one. Because like having to get up and go do stuff is a great way to have gotten up and gone and done stuff that you can then feel good about and maybe even talk about to your friends.
But if you have no pressure to do that, that's talking about like people born into a lot of.
Oh God, it's a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the most fascinating people I know are the ones that are like go-getters and not the sit around type. Like you need to do something.
Yes.
It has
Something
to be
meaningful. Right?
Yeah, or fulfilling too. But you can't just. I have issues with some friends that are just always chilling. You're just always
would go crazy. I couldn't always chill.
There's never no stresses or like a pressure. You don't work out, nothing. You're just always just
hanging
it's weird
out.
to me. Yeah.
That's not. I mean, usually that's not particularly psychologically healthy. It sounds nice. Like when you're stressed, you want to be, you know, relaxing, but then if all you do is relaxing, that actually gets really old really, really quickly.
Chillax is good because it's different from not chillaxing. When you're chillaxing all the time, you're neither chilling nor relaxing. You're doing nothing in a continuous way.
Yeah, really boring.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. Some people don't mind. I mean, some people have a less problem with it. For me, I would lose my...
Some have very active inner worlds, a lot of imagination, and that works for them. But for a lot of people, that's not really. It's kind of miserable.
You were talking about the pandemic, how people that were sort of isolated or, you know, it wasn't that severe prior to it kind of stayed the same. What about on the other side of the spectrum, the people who you saw it have a big impact on?
Yeah, I think people that had a more big impact, they would have like higher rates of substance use, like relapse, like maybe they were in recovery and they had built their life in a certain way. They were going to meetings, they were, you know, AA meetings and things like that. And then all of a sudden that stops. They're more vulnerable to that kind of stuff kind of coming back. So I think we saw a fair amount of that sort of thing happening.
And there was also the just work endlessly. Because it's always available.
That's another thing. Yeah, people would they would never really turn off, right? They would just be doing like their jobs like all day, all night, there's like no boundaries because there was no going to the office. I think that's still happening now. Like people are trying to like strike that right balance. But
Yeah, the complete opposite of chillaxing. Some people just can't turn it off.
I mean, in the first couple months of the pandemic, I had a book published, a full-length album come out, 2 podcasts created, company founded, working full-time as a psychiatrist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like there was nothing going on in my life, so I had to do stuff endlessly, which I imagine was quite annoying for everyone around me. Like, if you're done working, yeah, no, but I have another song to finish. Or
yeah, you did. You adapted well to it.
well, I mean, like, it was. I did that because normally I would do stuff and see friends and have a good time, or like do other things, like go out and do stuff, anything. And we were up in Connecticut at my mom's place because she has a lake house, and we were just there. And all I had was like work or music or a microphone, essentially, so I can make a podcast, whatever. And I just had no idea what to do with myself. Because, like, where am I going to go and get COVID?
Yeah. Well, that's why things like Clubhouse have become popular.
It was awesome.
Like things like the social audio popping up and Twitter Spaces and all that kind of stuff is because people are wanting to connect. So that's one good thing that came from the pandemic, I think, is that like audio talking medium as being a thing.
Yeah, there's been over 1.6 million podcasts that have started since March of 2020. So it's good. It gave people something to do instead of just chilling all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, yes, and that's not like a sustainable plan for life necessarily. It's a thing that you can turn into something like you did, right? You took the opportunity to change your whole surroundings, to move out of your parents' place, to set up a studio in your house, to make this the thing you did. And now that can continue and be part of a life. At the same time, when we have to kind of figure out what our life's going to be in a new context, that can be really challenging. So, good things can be stressful too, is the long and short of it.
No, but I think there's good stresses, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think there's a certain amount of, like, activation that you kind of have to function well in the world, and for different people it's different. And the level of novelty or excitement any one person needs to be at their optimal functioning can be a lot or a little. But if you're not at it, it goes badly. So, how
has work-life balance seems to be a mental health talking point, like you were saying before? Some people just throw that out. Is there a right approach to work-life balance?
Yeah, I don't like that phrase. I guess.
Why?
Because I think that it implies that like work is somehow not your life, or like it's a chore, and that life is something that happens outside of that. And I actually think that meaningful work, stuff that you're passionate about, is your life. And so I think more of like work-life integration, where you're able to kind of balance things in a way that makes sense and is cohesive, and not having like, if somebody doesn't want to go on vacation, then they don't want to go on vacation. Like maybe they don't like going to the beach, right? Maybe they actually just really love their job, whatever it is. And if that works for them, that's cool. And for someone else, that's not going to work. And so I don't like that sort of preconceived judgments around, oh, you shouldn't be working now, or that kind of thing. It just...
Yeah, I have a whole like speech I've done about this multiple times. I think work-life balance is a total scam. It's either there to make women feel bad, that they're being bad mothers.
Because they're always going to be out of balance in some way.
There's no way you can... There aren't enough hours for like a doctor, for example. If you do the math on like work-life balance and you assume the number of hours like a resident physician has to work and the number that are left after like eating, moving to and from work, etc., it's 0.4 hours a week you have left for life, assuming you only sleep 6 hours a night. And that you can't that's literally not what balance is, right? 0.4 hours and 156 not balanced by definition. So you can't balance that. So it's a great way to say you're not doing a good enough job at work-life balance. Maybe you should work on that in a situation
that's
Go to a
seminar about work-life
balance.
Yeah,
no, you really should get in tree pose about that, because you got to work on your work-life balance. It's a way to make people feel bad when work is overwhelming and meaningless. Is my contention. And I think meaning and meaningful work is the thing that keeps you from losing it and feeling bad. And at the same time, like, the thing that should make you want to take a break is if not taking a break gets in the way of the meaning in your life, then you have every reason to do so, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, no, you need to be more balanced and take some time off from the thing that you hate and is crushing your spirit, but you're forced to do endlessly. Like, that's different from being like, you know what, I really need some time to make sure that when I come back, my ideas are fresh and I can change the world and buzz. Like, it's a different thing. And that's why I think it's a scam.
Yeah, and I think some people, like, they need to make that dramatic career change, you know, like they need to listen to the data. Like, if they're really, really miserable in their career path, it might be time to actually make a more dramatic change. And I think we were talking earlier about medications and what they can do and what they can't. Like, you know, Prozac isn't going to fix somebody who's like hating their job and it's really the wrong job for them, right? The treatment there, the prescription really should be to make a bigger change. Sometimes meds help people get there, of course, but I'm very much like that your work, what you do with your life, like that's going to make a huge difference in your mental health.
When I get asked about work-life balance, I don't really have an answer. I enjoy what I do.
Right.
So for me, it's not really work. I mean, now it is my job, but it's enjoyable. You know, I still have that hunger and desire of it being a hobby, a side thing that has now become my main source of income, and I can actually, you know, I one of the reasons why I got depressed all those years ago before was because I just didn't know what I was doing. So I felt super insecure of, you know, a friend of mine introduces me to a girl. Like, oh, I think you guys would be great together. I felt bad not bringing anything to the table. Just, you know, just not having an answer of, oh, so what do you do? I don't know. I'm going to figure it out.
Hanging out. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I didn't want to be that guy, you know, that 30 years old with no plan. Everybody's different. I get it. But for me, my work-life balance is now Monday through Wednesday on purpose. I've stacked my week early on. So then the rest of the week I can chill and, you know, have fun. But it's a Friday that we linked up. So that doesn't matter to me. If someone was to tell me tomorrow is the only day that they could come in on a Saturday,
Make it work.
So be it.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And for you, like, the time you take off probably informs what you do on the air. Right. So, I mean, when I think about, like, the stressors people go under and the idea of work-life balance, like, our feelings at the end of the day are a story we tell ourselves, how we feel about something. And we're putting together information to tell ourselves a coherent story. And then you have to kind of explain that to other people, like on a date. And this is one of those examples where, like, if you were to say the thing you were really thinking, God, I feel really lost, you imagine it's going to go terribly. And so you never try it out. And then you never know that saying that might make the date go really well because she might really relate to that. And so that kind of, like, silent but mutually agreed bullshitting of each other that we do, right, we refer to that as pretend mode, I think is really problematic for folks because, like, there's this huge elephant in the room, which is like, I don't feel necessarily confident about having a plan with my life. By the way, did any of those plans survive COVID? I mean, like, they got changed at the least. So I think plans are a scam. And, like, what are you doing with your life is a story we tell ourselves and can tell other people.
It's more like what you do with things that are presented, whether it's an opportunity, a challenge, or both. Like, you don't really know at the time, like, what it's going to be. It's more like you see something and then you act on it rather than saying this is a bad thing or a good thing. It's more, okay, this is happening and I'm going to do something.
You're not a good poker player because you get dealt the best cards all the time.
Right, it's what you do. It's what you do.
How
with
you
them.
play your hand.
Yeah. And that's life is how you play your hand. There is
People say, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, or Z until blah, 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 blah. And, like, that's just not how it works. Like, you have to just, like, be in the moment. And
you can win on 8-6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. People that I think have a more resiliency and healthier are able to kind of just...
Well, don't you think you also have to be building towards that? Like, certain opportunities that I've gotten is because I was ready for them and I was building.
Yes.
You know, I've done over 1,500 episodes.
Wow.
So it's like, this isn't just out of luck that there's a resume, there's a longevity and a duration that it's been going on. So it's also building towards something.
How much of it was willing to fuck up?
Oh, a lot of it. Dude, the first 2 years I was doing this was awful.
Yeah, but that's what's great, like that you take those chances. And I think that when people like really, really scared and don't take any chances and just kind of avoid any kind of conflict, any kind of stress in their life, they don't really grow in any way.
One of the things I think that's crucial about being a successful person or getting there is getting comfortable with fucking up a lot on the way, which doesn't mean you should be a chronic miserable failure. It means that being able to take risks and failing and learning that can be okay is how people succeed eventually. Being afraid of failing will keep you from trying anything that might be cool at the end of the day. And so getting practice with failure and having that be part of a story you can tell yourself and tell other people proudly, that's getting good at life.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I feel that way about working out and like jujitsu. First 6 months that I was taking classes, I was just getting ragdolled by kids half my age, half my weight, because I just didn't know. And then you start seeing that, oh, you know what? Every time they take my back, I'm not getting choked out, right? Or if you're working out in the beginning, maybe you can't bench 90 pounds, and then from there you start growing. So it's like the baby steps, the little steps. Or do you feel like some people, when they go through these mental health issues, they look to hit a home run right away, or instead of, getting a base hit, getting on small steps leading to big wins?
They're like waiting for something to happen that won't happen. That something will change in their life in a way that like is not realistic. So we have to look at the more sort of stepwise kind of things. Absolutely incremental.
Social media, or prior to social media, I think was really good at giving people the impression that other people were just crushing it every
All
time.
the time, right?
And what I like about social audio as a format is like you get to hear people in real time not doing things perfectly and getting better over time at using that format, for example. And that's really, I think that's great. But like imagining everyone else does everything perfectly because you only see the curated version of it at the end of the day is like kind of awful and paralyzing. One of my favorite photographers is a woman named Sally Mann, and I got to meet her daughter. And there's this amazing photograph she took of her son in a river. And this is like a photograph that like inspired me. I went to a museum to see this damn thing. And she's like, oh yeah, my mom took 50 pet copies of that before she got the final one. And it was bad 50 times. Like, oh, no wonder the final thing I saw in the book is good, because she messed it up over and over and over and over and over again, but had the idea of what good would eventually look like. And so what we see in this collection is, perfect. Behind perfect is all of this practice. And we don't imagine that practice when we're looking at successful people. And if we did, it would be a little bit easier for us.